In this episode, our first interview episode, it's all about culture as we're joined by expert trainer Charles Holmes.
Welcome to Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Prepare to learn something new about the industry that keeps us moving.
Check out all our podcast content on our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X. I'm excited about this episode where we're joined by expert trainer Charles Holmes. He is an expert in collections, underwriting, and management. And he's joining us today to have a conversation with us about culture and its impact on the dealership. Welcome, Charles.
Hey, Ted, how you doing?
Doing good. To start off,
Good.
you want to tell us a little bit about your background, the perspective you bring?
Sure. I have been in collections for 25 plus, maybe 30 years. I began with General Electric. I worked for Household Retail Services with Citibank. And then I went to Meta Financial Services, which is where I met you. I have been a lead, a manager, a assistant vice president over collections, underwriting, training. That's a little bit of my background. I'm a major corporate junkie because corporations believe in culture and what culture does and how they go out and how it impacts your business.
Yeah, we were having a great conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how this is something we need to bring to the podcast. We were talking about culture, and you have a great background, having that corporate background, and then going into the independent car, used car space.
The very small business space, yes.
Yeah, you brought a lot to the table there, having that background we don't typically see coming into the independent used car space. But let's start with why do you feel culture is important? What's the value of culture?
Culture dictates everything that you do, from your hiring practices to your bottom line. It talks about what your dealership is, who your dealership is, who your employees are, and who your customers are. Culture dictates everything that we do in our daily business. And it has a major impact on bottom line because it's setting a tone for your customers as well as your employees.
Yeah. So it's culture itself is almost like a top level strategy.
Absolutely, and it has to come from the top down. Those at the top set the culture. Anyone else who works through that will work towards that culture goal and push that down so it affects everyone that's there.
No, that makes complete sense. What type of culture are was your goal when you were working with Meta, running collections and underwriting? What do you see as like the target culture goal for a used car dealership?
I think we're looking at a target of success. We're looking at a culture where people want to be there because the more they want to be there, the harder they're going to perform. You want to set a culture of I'm going to use this word, which is a firebrand word of inclusiveness. Mm-hmm. But all I mean is that everybody in the company has a voice at the table. They have a place at the table where they can sit down and you can talk about issues that are going to affect the business, affect your bottom line. But you have to have that open and honest dialogue in order to get that done. So you really do want a culture of openness where you can share and talk about your concerns and the things you think you can do to fix it. I had at Meta Financial Services, I had a policy that said you can say anything you want to me. You can complain about everything you want to complain, but come with a solution, because I want to hear what the solution is as well as what your complaint is and how we can fix it, because it has to be a we mentality. Running top down, where one person says this is how we do it and this is how we do it and not why we do it, it doesn't work. It sets a negative tone for your culture.
No, that makes sense. Where basically, how did you learn this? What brought you to this conclusion about the importance of culture?
In working in corporate America, there were 2 or 3 mantras. One was you want to protect the brand, which means everything that an employee does has an effect on your brand. Be that a car salesman, a title clerk, a collector, a customer service rep, even a repo company. It has an impact on your culture. So you want to make sure that all those people are on board and understand what your culture is and where that driving impact comes, and that's protecting your brand. Number two is that you want people in your organization to feel like they're needed and feel like they wanted. The work environment has changed. When a while ago we went to work and we stayed there for 25 years because we wanted the gold watch and we wanted I've been there 25 years. Well, that doesn't matter anymore. What you want to do, and we did when I worked for Citigroup, we did a survey called Voice of the Employee. And what it did was it talked about not the day-to-day things that we do, but it talked about things like respect. It talked about things like training. It talked about things like I have a voice. And what we found out is that the most important thing to employees is to be respected and to be wanted. So if you want to build a solid culture, you must show that respect. And in this business, sometimes it's very easy to get lost up in the minutia of here's what we have to do, but not the here's why. To show that respect, you need to have the conversation about here's why we're doing what we're doing, and to be able to defend what you're doing. I used to hate to go into a meeting and say we're making this change, but not have a reason why we're making the change. Not being able to sell that process and the change that we're making because we don't know why, we're just doing it that way.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely essential. You need to empower your people. And
Absolutely.
if you don't feel like you can empower them, they're probably not the right person for the job, period.
Or if you don't want to empower them, they're probably not the right people for the job. Because remember, as successful as that lowest level employee is going to be how successful your business is. That means everyone needs to have a voice. That means that when the upper management or the owner sets the tone and sets the culture, there must be total buy-in. And if you have people who are not willing to buy in to that culture, then you probably really need to make a decision on, are they the right people to be there, because they're not seeing my vision, they're not following the culture that I've set forward. And
So
that's critical.
what are things that set that tone? What are things that from the top down to set that tone for culture? What does that actually look like?
Accountability. Everyone is held accountable. Do you want to kill culture? Is to have one or two performers who are not doing their job and it appears nothing's happening to them and it just doesn't matter. That will kill the culture quickly. So accountability is one. Number two is having a voice. If I don't understand it, please help me understand why we're doing what we're doing. Um, Respect, and I think that goes both ways. From the owner to the car salesman to the collector, everyone must have that level of respect that you're treated like a human being and not like just somebody that can be replaced. That can kill a culture. Everybody needs to be on board. Everybody needs to be on that bus to say, here's where we're going, and here's my cog in the wheel to get us there. And if I don't do my job, then we're not going to succeed. If I don't succeed, then the business doesn't succeed because I have that buy-in.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. You have to get that buy-in, and I think it's a little more challenging to set that tone in the independent used car dealership space, uh,
Mhm.
and yet it's so critical. And
Well, I think we have the independent car, the buy here, pay here car dealerships. They're living under this cloud because they're not there to help anybody. They're there to rip people off. They're there because um, people who don't have any money can come buy a car. When all actually, none of those things are true.
the stigma, the
The
the industry
the
stigma.
stigma of it all. None of those things are true. And we have to help our employees so they can help our customers understand that this is not a stigma. This is where you are today. And if you buy a car today and you pay for 2 years or 3 years, you may be able to trade it in for one of the brand new BMWs you're really looking at. But it's the tone and the culture that will help set that understanding and that knowledge of working with the customer.
So, in a sense, the way that the management treats their line level employees sets the tone for how the line level employees are going to treat customers. So it really ties
Absolutely.
in. Culture is
And treat
all
each
in,
other
yeah, all encompassing.
and treat each other and treat other departments. because let's face it, we're in the buy here, pay here world, we're all one big team. Be it collections, sales, titles, mechanics, we're all working towards the same goal and we all want to be on the same team. It's very difficult to be on that same team when there's finger pointing and no accountability and no accepting responsibility for what we're doing, because again, it all affects the brand. It all affects who you are as a corporation. And if that gets out there, if it gets out there that ABC car dealership doesn't care, they're rude, they're nasty, they're ugly, guess what? People are not going to come back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and customer service is such a big, important differentiator in our industry. We try to drive that repeat and referral business, and that repeat and referral business is only made possible by our customer service experience that we deliver, and that's just so tightly tied into culture. It all comes full circle.
100%, because our customers want the same thing we want as employees and as people. They want respect. They want to be treated with dignity. They don't want to feel like they're less than because they have to buy a car here, because they've had some credit issues, whatever the case will be. They want the same thing. And if you give them that, they will refer you. They will come back. They will get good credit and they will still buy cars from you because guess what? They really love the way they were treated. And that comes from the top, and that works all the way down through every employee to the customer himself.
That makes complete sense. One of the things I say that if you don't like your customer, you shouldn't be in this business.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think that part of that stigma that Buy Here Pay Here works under is that we don't care about our customers. We don't care about the people who come in. All we want is the money. When in all actuality, I bet there's a lot of dealerships who are doing things like a free repair every now and then, or you can't afford the repair, we'll do a side note. You can pay it off in a period of time. But those aren't the things people hear about. What people hear about are the high interest rates, the rude collectors calling them when they're one day late on their payment. They hear about the failure for them to provide customer service. That's not what we need, and that's not how we pursue to be long-term successful and to make a profit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it truly, your profitability and your culture truly have a tight nexus.
They run hand in hand. They run hand in hand.
One
Because
thing,
if there's a
one thing I was going to say, just based on our experience working together, there were times it felt like we had the culture right, and there were times it felt like we had the culture wrong.
right.
What are kind of clues to you that the culture isn't where you want it to be?
Turnover
Turnover.
employees that are there. Employees who were once glad to be there no longer want to be there. New people coming in saying, I ain't going to be here long, and they're not. Long-term customers not coming back, not communicating. Customers, period, coming in and saying, I have a problem because A, B, and C, and D happened and I was not treated with respect. Those are key indicators that there's a problem. All I do is watch the people. And when management just doesn't care. I think there's a point in time when managers, when people say managers just, they don't care. It's about the bottom line is Friday, we need money in. I don't care what you say. I don't care how you do it. Stay within the law, but get that money in here. And I think that's a huge part in how you can tell a culture's failing. When there is no communication between departments or finger pointing in departments. We all know the worst thing to do is go into a meeting and have another department manager point at your department and say, you're not doing this, and you've never had a conversation with them before. That's a damaging thing to the culture, because everybody in that management meeting comes out grumbling and rumbling and not being very happy. When all actuality, if the situation was handled between two managers earlier, you wouldn't have had that problem.
No, that totally true. And I could think of so many examples just in our mutual experience working together.
I think any business has those examples because they happen. And sometimes they happen because the strength of your management team. Other times they happen because there's the one-upmanship. If I don't do this, they're not going to think I'm doing my job. When in all actuality, If I can go to U10 and say, here's the problem, and we can resolve the problem, then the problem's resolved when we talk about it. It's really not a problem anymore.
So true. So true.
And
One
that
thing
and
I wanted to bring up, we've talked about how culture relates to employees and their job satisfaction, how it relates to customer service. What about how culture can drive compliance? Because
oh,
we have so many compliance demands placed upon us nowadays. How does
mhm.
culture relate to compliance?
If your culture if your culture is clear and concise and you understand you're going to be compliance driven, then people are going to follow those edicts, those rules. They're going to do those things they have to do. If your culture is one that says, I don't care about those. We need to sell 60 cars this month. We need to collect this much money this month. We need to have this many loans approved this month. In the shop, you have to have this many cars in and out. We're not going to worry about some of those compliance issues. We're simply going to focus on bottom line and getting things done. And that's not, but that tone is set in culture, but it's not a good tone that's being set. What should happen is that we should talk about the compliance issues, what we have to do to complete those compliance issues, how we maintain those compliance issues.
I think that's so critical because audits happen, complaints happen, investigations happen. It's just part of
Hmm.
this industry.
Hmm.
But if you have at least at the baseline, we're going to follow the law. We're going to always follow the law. We're
Absolutely.
going to do our best. Sometimes it's challenging. This is not an
You
easy
bet.
industry, and you do make mistakes. But if you set that tone from the beginning, then when
Hmm.
you do have the audit, when you do have the compliance investigation, instead of that chain of recriminations and looking for the scapegoat
Absolutely.
and who to blame, you're which just makes your business all the more toxic. And
Hmm.
uh, ultimately, I think this is one of the routes to one of the to ruin your culture
And if you're
when
going to talk
something
about
goes wrong.
right, and if you're going to talk about client and culture, I mean, culture and setting a tone. One of the worst things you can do is overreact when an audit comes.
Yeah.
I need you to go through every account. I need you to look at this and this and this and this. Well, now you're panicking, saying we're not doing our job. If there's a complaint come in, before you point fingers, investigate it, find out what's right or what's wrong. Because the society we live in today, there's a lot of complaints being filed. There's a lot of things happening because we have this new thing called the internet, and people are telling you how to clean up your credit, and people telling you how to get stuff for free. I do is call and complain, and the further you go up, the more you get. Well, in all actuality, if you were not to if you were not to just believe every complaint, but do the research first. If in fact you understand what the compliance measures are and you work towards them, then you don't have to panic when there's an audit that's coming.
Yeah.
That's a morale killer. An audit's coming, but we're going to make sure before everybody gets here. Well, if we're doing the right thing because our culture says we're going to do the right thing, then there's no need for that.
You've got the culture
I,
driving compliance.
absolutely,
And where you have a process failure, you correct it. You have processes
absolutely,
that drive you to compliance, and we can trust in our processes. Humans are, make mistakes, and when it happens, we
sure.
deal with it. But we want to look at that end goal of keeping that positive,
And
compliance-driven culture intact.
and I think we want to look at the mistake itself. Is that mistake our fault because we haven't trained? Is that mistake our fault because we haven't done the right things? Or is it the fault of the person who made the error before we write people up, we fire people, et cetera, et cetera? We need to look at where that mistake came from. That's one of my biggest challenges I had was somebody would call it was a mistake. Somebody would say, this is this and this and this is what happened. Wait, before we go there, let's investigate. Let's figure out what we have to do to fix it.
That
Um, and is this something everybody does, or is this just us as a company saying we didn't care about that then, but now we got caught in an audit or a complaint, and now we're concerned. If you were doing everything, if you were setting that tone from the very beginning, then you're not going to have that panic.
no, that absolutely.
And that's why it's critical to have culture in place.
Absolutely. Your culture is everything. It's really that fundamental quality of your business, and you got to guard it and protect it. And with
Right.
that,
And I think setting a mission statement, setting a culture statement of here's what we believe, but everybody in your organization knows it. They understand it and they believe and want to follow it. And if they don't, then maybe we need to really look and say, is this the right place for you?
absolutely. And that's probably actually a good note for us to stop here with this episode. And we'll be back with our part 2, where we'll talk more about that and finding those good culture fits for your company. And so with that, it's been another episode of Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Be sure to tune in for part 2, where we talk about finding those culture fits. Check out our podcast on all our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X.
Thank you for listening. Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers, is a production of Meta Financial Services Incorporated.